Good afternoon to all the viewers and welcome back to ICCA Live, World Class Culinary Online. This afternoon, we have a start of a new series of webinars on sugar art, Decorate Cakes Like a Pro. And the first episode is on fondant, the art of decorating a nice cake. I will now hand over to our host, Shanaz Raja, Director of Courses at the ICCA Dubai. Over to you, Shanaz.
My mic was off as always. Thank you, Karun. And this time it's something completely different. The art of decorating your cake like a pro. This time we have with us Miss Nasreen Danki, a master sugar crafter with the most amazing skills, second to none, who will demonstrate various techniques from covering a cake to molding, flour making, and royal icing. Nasreen's tryst with Sugarcraft began with having to create a christening cake for her daughter 25 years ago. The joy she got from that experience fueled a passion which she has pursued since then, and you will experience that passion as you see her hands working during the webinar. So remember to keep your eyes glued to her hands as they work their magic. And I'm sure just watching her will take your hands to the next level. We will keep all our questions to Nasreen for the end so we don't interrupt her flow. And so do keep typing them into the chat and I will collect them for you. Without further ado, over to you, Nasreen.
And to our worldwide audience, wherever you may be and in whichever time zone you may be in, good day. And I hope you're having as super a day as we are having here. Now, this webinar being the introduction to Sugarcraft, what exactly is Sugarcraft? It's just another name for cake decorating. And what is the importance of cake decorating? As long as we have human landmarks like birthdays and weddings or christenings, a cake will always be the centerpiece. In fact, different cultures that celebrate differently, a sweet is always exchanged. There's always an exchange of something sweet. So without much ado, I'm going to introduce you to this wonderful world of Sugarcraft that I deal with. And as with every craft, there are tools to the trade. So from rolling pins, this is a simple one. You get the non-stick little ones, you get the textured rollers, and we have a range of tools, which I am going to show you the various uses of as we progress from webinar to webinar. Okay, so now where do we begin with sugar crafting? The first thing we have to look at is our cake boards that we anchor our cakes to. Now, there are different types of cake boards because it depends on the size of your cake, the weight of your cake, and the quantities. You can have a single tier or a triple tier or anything more than one. So the three different types are a cake card. Can you see how thin this is? Then we have a cake board, which is thicker and is able to support the weight of one cake. And then we've got the cake drum. She will support the weight of a triple tier. So what we've started with today is anchoring the cake to the board, and different cakes require different glues to attach them to their boards. And why do we attach it to the board? So that when we do drape it with either liquid sugar or rolled sugar, the cake does not shift. So anchored our cake, and the primary thing we start, our starting point, is covering with fondant, because that gives us our surface to decorate. And that's where we begin. And that's where I'm going to begin. and show you the how, when, and why. So to prevent my sugar from sticking to my rolling surface, I will dust it with sugar. And into this, I will place my fondant, because this is a rolled sugar skills. Fondant is a sugar that doesn't dry. So if I covered my cake today, it would still remain soft enough to eat, or put a knife into it tomorrow to be able to cut it and serve it. In fact, fondant does not have the hardening agent that we know as carboxymethyl cellulose, or CMC, familiar to some as gum paste, because it is the hardening agent that converts a non-drying sugar into one that does dry hard. Example, when you need to make flowers and things like that, you want your sugar to be hard or dry hard. The finished product has to dry hard. So now today being a slightly cooler day, the fondant is a bit stiffer. Usually in the summer, when we have the heat on, there's no problem rolling out. Here I've got to build muscles today. So let me get this to the size we need for the size of the cake. And in so doing, we're nearly there. In so doing, we have a rolled sugar, a sheet of rolled sugar that I can now lift and cover my cake with. So here we are. All I'm going to do is remove the excess sugar from around this. And what else do you think fondant can be used for? Because there is a lot of confusion about the difference between fondant and gum paste. Now, gum paste has CMC in it, which dries hard, like I mentioned earlier, whereas fondant does not. Fondant remains soft, non-drying. In fact, it has ingredients in it that prevent her from drying out, which is liquid sugar glucose and glycerine, etc. So here's my cake. I will lift and give this sheet of sugar to the cake. And then we use another nifty tool called cake smoothers, which actually remove any air bubbles, but also smooth that surface and connect her to the main frame, which is our cake underneath. And then I will work the corners and bring that sugar home. And it has to hug my cake, because this creates the primary decorating surface that I will then create other, or show you other techniques, decorative finishes that will get our cake to where she needs to be. Okay, now, because fondant is very slow drying, she is used only to cover cakes. We don't use fondant to make flowers or to do, for example, goes without saying, royal icing is a liquid sugar medium. So let me get the excess sugar off this, so that we then have a ready surface to show you onward techniques. Now, who knows anything about the history of cake decorating? It began in Britain, and Britain still today has one of our most active guilds, the Sugarcraft Guild. But anyway, sugarcrafting began in Tudor England. Actually, Queen Elizabeth I's cake was the first introduction to the world to the skills of her then, her chef, her pastry chef. And it was introduced in the Tudor courts. And from there, because you know that the sun never set on the British Empire, so they took these skills, they spread these skills all over the world, not only taking these skills out, but bringing chefs from across the world into Britain, bringing spices and techniques from other chefs elsewhere, which then took sugar crafting to a different level. Okay, now, I'm just going to put this away. And we then have our cake nicely covered, right? Now, what are the advantages to learning to bake and decorate beautifully? One, if you're just a home baker, you can put a better quality of cake on the table for your own family. Bring the wow factor to it. Second, all of us celebrate special occasions, whether it's our children's birthdays or anniversaries or weddings or new births, baby showers. As long as there are human landmark special occasions, there will always be the presence of a cake on the table. Besides which, if you're as a home baker, you can learn how to decorate like a pro. It augments your earning skills to perhaps bring an added earning capacity to your family, which a lot of ladies are doing at the moment right now, because COVID has taken away a lot of jobs, has put people in awkward conditions, financial conditions, and there are lots of people catering from home, baking and decorating from home, because guess what? Children don't stop having birthdays, or their special occasions never just run out. So lockdown or not, if you know how to decorate, you can work from home. So I have a question to ask you. I mentioned earlier about cake boards, right? So my first question to you is, what is the difference between a cake card, cake board, and a cake drum?
Can you see the answers coming up, Nasreen? Can you see the, I'll read it out.
Okay, yes. Each supports a different weight of cake. They can be used interchangeably. Okay, the next is the cake board and the, it's too small for you to.
Yeah.
The cake board, and this is the most, I can't read the last. John, can you give me that last line?
The cake board is the best and the most convenient to use.
The cake board is the best and most convenient to use. Okay, so we have a 92% that says each supports a different weight of cake. Yes, and I will elucidate further. The cake card, because now it's addressing the first person's answer, they can be used interchangeably, and that is right, because this thin one can be cut to any size, and it acts in between the tiers when you are doweling and stacking a cake. Of course, when it's a multi-tier, the base drum will be the base support. Yep, you're right. So 92% of our viewers were correct. Okay, what we're going to do now is have a 60-second break. Don't go away. I'll be back. And I'm going to then show you the various texturing techniques.
Nasreen, your mic is not on. The mic. No, not yet, not yet. Keep talking, Nasreen. Keep talking. I'll see if I can't hear you now. No, not yet. Not yet. Not yet, Nasreen. We can't hear you yet. They're just changing Nasreen's earbud. They're giving her a new earbud. So let's hope that. Not yet, Nasreen. I think the break somehow disconnected her. I think we just have to wait for Nasreen to get back on. They'll just refresh her room and get her back in. Anyway, I'll answer Preeti's question until then. What kind of color can be used in white fondant? Now, fondant is made with egg white and sugar, water and things like that. So that's water soluble. So you need to use any kind of water soluble color that you can color your fondant with. And very important to use a paste or a gel because sugar is hygroscopic and will become very liquidy. So any kind of water soluble color should do it. Nasreen? I think
Yes.
we can hear you now. We can hear you now. You can get back on. I was keeping your audience entertained.
Okay. I've got texturing techniques to show you because they are our ongoing decorative skills that we can cover a cake or decorate a cake with. And since we have a surface ready to decorate, I'm going to show you how. This nifty little tool is called a crimper, and she surface textures into a cake, into any soft fondant layer. But you do have to remember that any texturing tool, whether she's embossing, whether it's a crimper, whether it's a cutout inlay, has to be done when your fondant is still soft. So these are finishing techniques, and I'm going to show you just, even if I just do one side, but show you how it's done. She bites, creating a surface texture, and this is called crimping. So if I show you one side there, you can see how that surface has been crimped. Now, it doesn't only have to be the top edge, it could be the bottom edge as well, where I have already royalized in place a little fondant sausage, because we never leave the baselines of our cakes unfinished. It's always professionally finished with something pretty. And since I've used crimping as the top decorative bar, I will match it as the base decorative bar. So there you have it. Just to demo, I've given you one side. But what if I took an embosser and then I decided to do an all-over texture? So you can take any embossing tool and create this all-over texturing, which is what I'm doing, and I will get done with it in just a minute. And then you will see how you can create a textured, all-over texture. And moreover, I'm going to show you how to luster it in the smaller little bits. So can you see that texture? I've just done one bar. Or if you inlay is another technique that has to be done while your fondant is wet. So if I placed, it's like a cookie cutter, if I placed that and punched out that piece of fondant, she comes out. I can take this out, but I can't leave my cake bare, right? So with the same shape, I cut out another piece and I can inlay it, and she'll fit like a hand in a glove because it's cut with the same cutter. So if I then to this, bit of noise here, but if I then to this put a little luster spray, now look at the difference. Can you see the texture just jump out at you? There you have it. So these are some finishing techniques, the crimping or the embossing or the cutter inlay. So onward with it. I also wanted to just bring to your attention, going back to the history of cakes, the first cakes or bakes were usually round. And why was this so? Because the early cultures that were the first or the primary bakers would bake to celebrate ceremonious or religious occasions, which were governed by the harvests. Every culture celebrated a harvest festival, or that's where Thanksgiving came from, or the harvest depended on the phases of the sun and moon. So the sun and moon being round, bakes represented that harvest celebration by being round also. Now, as I mentioned earlier, techniques were imported into Europe and into Britain, and when it reached Britain, it wasn't just a single round, it became a triple tier round. And these triple tiers, 3 rounds, implied or indicated the 3 rings, the engagement ring, the wedding ring, and then the eternity ring. So just a little bit of history for you. And as I mentioned earlier, cakes began in the Tudor courts. And in England, because England was importing chefs and had her own chefs, and the banqueting tables of Victorian or Tudor England had lavish culinary spreads. So the dessert table was the pièce de résistance. And chefs vied very, very competitively to have a place on that banquet table, and their competition was to be selected so that their fare was fit for a king. And extravagant displays started with marzipan modeling way back then, but it has improved because royal icing has been introduced and rolled sugar skills, and from basic we've got beautiful today. And the spreading of decorating trends was because the sun never set on the British Empire. Beginning in England, it went all the way to Australia and India, Japan, and then to the US of A on the other end. So we have 3 major guilds today because of that. One is the British Sugarcraft Guild, then you have the Australian Sugarcraft Guild, and you have the US Guild in Oklahoma. And from there, we have very elaborate spreads because it began in England as very basic, it began in Italy as very basic tea breads, and it's evolved into today what we have as our triple tier extravaganzas. So actually the Romans had this custom of crumbling cake on a bride's head, and it depicted, may the bride always have the abundance and God's blessings. The guests would pick up these crumbs, take them home, hoping to take home some of the abundance the bride received to take it into their own homes. Unmarried girls, fun fact, unmarried girls would put a piece under their pillow, and as the superstition went, that they would dream of who was going to be their husband next. But then came World War II, and then where sugar became expensive, and this is where confetti took the place of crumbled cake, to where it wasn't wasted anymore. Cake wasn't wasted anymore. And so confetti was then, or rose petals, or rice, anything that depicted May you never go hungry. May you always have an abundance of food on your table. Now, I would like to introduce to you 3 upcoming webinars that I'm going to host for you. And it is going to give you an insight into our 3 certified programs. One of them is our sugar paste or rolled sugar skills, beginning with what I've shown you today. The second webinar, that's not the webinar, the second certified program, which instantly is also going to be the next webinar after the sugar paste, is our sugar flowers. Now, these are made from sugar, which embellish wedding cakes. And the third is our liquid sugar module, which is the piping and the royal icing skills. So each of these are individually certified, working towards a master's if you do all 3. And I have another question for you. So what do you think is the best way to store a fondant covered cake?
I don't know how they know that. But
perhaps some of them are my old students. Yep.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, we have the percentages climbing. Well done, you guys, because 70% have given me in a climate controlled room, and that is correct. But there is also a percentage saying in the refrigerator. Now, I'm going to tell you the reason why we do not store in a refrigerator, because fondant, royal icing are hygroscopic and they will absorb moisture from their environments. Now, when you open a fridge door, what comes swirling out at you? Moisture, and it's non-sterile. So the cake, being hygroscopic, absorbs this moisture. And being non-sterile, you will have fungal formation between cake and sugar. 2, you take her out of the fridge, it comes to room temperature and your cake sweats. And if you have anything colored on it, you have color bleed as well. So to prevent any of these 3 occurring, when you have a fondant covered cake or a royalized cake, it's always stored in a temperature controlled room. And when you're waiting for things to dry, you can cover it with a food umbrella to keep her until you're ready to box her and send it off to the person the cake is for. Whereas buttercream cakes and ganached cakes can go in the fridge. Why are they not hygroscopic? Because of the fat content in butter and in ganache. It prevents the cake from absorbing moisture from its surrounds. So hope that answers your question. And there's more to learn when you study with a professional, and you will then get a compound understanding of the how, when, and why of things. Now, I've asked you this question. I'm going to put it to you now. If you have any questions to ask me, if you have any doubts you want clarified, or any questions that you need answers to, I'm ready for you. Shanaz, do we have any answers from the audience? I mean, questions from the audience? You'll have to read that to me, darling, because I can't read it. So what is the first question?
What is the preferred shipping temperature?
Shipping temperature. Now, when you have a business, you will obviously have a temperature controlled van or a transportation vehicle. So between 15 and 25 is the optimum temperature, not to create humidity, but also to keep that cake viable until it gets from A to B. Does that help? What is our next question? Can we use traditional fats, ghee, to butter? Cream instead of butter? No. Ghee is clarified butter and it's too liquid, whereas butter binds better because it has a better body. And cream can be used as a filler in between cakes. but it doesn't replace butter. It can replace buttercream because then you've got sugar added to it, but not just used on its own. If you want to, I mean, there are cakes that are covered just with fresh cream when you want to put fresh fruits on top. Yes, but they will not be fondant covered or royalized. Fresh cream cake is usually left open-faced. Is it necessary to add glycerine and
Gelatine to fondant.
to fondant? Now, when your fondant dries out, can you see my remaining fondant? I have bagged it straight away because it dries. It's air drying. Most of our sugar mediums are air drying. So to prevent her from drying out, or if she has dried out, you can put a little bit of glycerine, add a little bit of vegetable shortening, give it to your hands, and then give it to your fondant, re-knead it if she's dried out a bit. So that's where you would use glycerine. What is the next question?
How long can
This is nice.
How long can fondant last and still taste good? It will always maintain its taste, but the question is, you want to eat it when it's you're still able to cut it. And it's not dry or it doesn't break a tooth when you try to bite into it. And having said that, the tradition of a triple tier wedding cake is the topmost tier stays for one whole year. But believe me, when you want to celebrate 1 year later, you do have to remove the fondant covering, recover, cut, and enjoy. But on its own, fondant, sugar, oil, and salt are nature's preservatives. So it won't go bad, it just hardens and gets very dry and non-edible. Hope that helps.
the next one is, can we use traditional?
No, I've answered that.
Okay. What's the difference between sugar paste and fondant?
Aha, very good question. Sugar paste. There are many types of sugar pastes. Fondant does not have the hardening agent, the carboxymethyl cellulose, which is the hardening, binding, bonding agent. So she remains soft, pliable, cuttable, eatable for days after the cake is covered. Whereas CMC paste or gum paste, popularly known as gum paste, is what we make our other decorations with. They have to dry hard. For example, if you want a bow to hold its shape or not collapse on itself, for example, that's where you would not use fondant. You would use a different gum paste or sugar paste for the decorative techniques that we use to finish a cake with. So, and there are pastillage pastes, there are modeling pastes, fondant is just to cover a cake, full stop. The other sugar pastes you're taught how to use and how to make when you take the whole course, and then you understand the how, when, and why, and which is used where for what finishing technique.
Another question is, how do we add color to fondant?
How do we add color to fondant? Okay, this is demonstrated for you in class, but the best types of colors to use are the concentrated spectral gels, where you put a little bit and it converts it. Now you will see on YouTube and things where they use the fondant, or if that's a piece of fondant to be colored, they will take a bit of gel, put it in there, and roll it in, stretch, roll, knead, roll. Okay? But I, in class, will show you a more hygienic way to color paste, where you have minimum hand contact to bring the health and hygiene factor into play.
And how long does the take fondant to dry?
Fondant almost doesn't dry. She remains soft and pliable, even open for an edible for about 2 weeks. Then it becomes too hard to cut. She's still edible, but it's like eating hard candy. She never goes bad. It'll yellow, and as long as you've kept it dust-free, she can remain edible as long as it's soft enough to eat. But it's very slow drying compared to gum paste or other.
So another person, can you use pectin instead of gelatin?
No, gelatin is the preferred medium, and our colors have gelatin in them also, which further soften your sugar paste. Okay, so that I think brings us back to the end of our poll and question and answer segment or section. And I just wanted to end with this little note to tell you that cakes represent our best culinary offerings, honoring our most loved people. In earlier times, when sugar was rationed and spices were not readily available, it was considered an honor to be honored with a cake. Today, the message remains the same. A cake says, you're special, you're important, and moreover, you're loved. And we here at the ICCA Sugarcraft department can happily say that every cake we undertake becomes a piece of cake, a beautifully decorated piece of cake. So with that, I will say till next time, we look forward to seeing you for our next webinar, which will be our sugar paste and rolled sugar skills. Till then, keep well, keep happy. Bye for now. And over to
Thank
Shahnaaz.
you, Nasreen.
Over to Shahnaaz. Thank you.
Just like all our instructors, you make everything look so simple. But I know for a fact that only practice makes perfect. Because when I try to crimp, I make holes in the cake. Taking the initiative to watch a video and learn is good. But if you have the ability to have hands-on classes with teachers like Nasreen, who have perfected the art over years, don't think twice. Go for it. It is an investment into your life. About today's webinar, there are no handouts to show as it's a technical skill. And you can watch the replay and follow the techniques to repeat them. Thank you, everyone. And see you shortly on Wednesday with Yihan for his last webinar on coffee, and thereafter to continue with Nasreen and sugar crafting. Until then, bye-bye for now.
Thank you for that, Shahnaaz and Ms. Nasreen, for the fantastic session on fondant. As a eager learner, I was able to pick up on some tips and techniques showcased by you today. For those who missed out on the complete live action, the replay video of this webinar will be soon coming into your email. And yes, as Shahnaaz had mentioned, we look forward to seeing you in the next webinar on coffee on Wednesday. Until then, goodbye from all of us here.